When times get tough, when people feel lost, anxious, or uncertain about the future, they often look for someone to step in and make everything right again. They want a hero, a strong leader, someone who promises to fix what's broken and restore a sense of order. This isn't a new thing. It's something deep in our psychology, a pattern that's been around for centuries. Carl Jung called this the Saviour archetype. In this video, we're going to explore how that archetype plays out, not just in myths and religion, but in modern politics, media, and culture. And we'll ask a tough question. What happens when the saviour we turn to isn't who we think they are? The saviour is a symbol buried deep in the human psyche. It's not just about religion or mythology, it's a part of the way we see the world. It shows up in stories, in history, and in politics. And sometimes, when people are especially afraid or divided, this archetype comes to life in real individuals. But here's the catch. When we don't understand what we're projecting, when we don't face the darker parts of ourselves, we risk turning these leaders into something they're not. We create what Jung would call a false messiah. This is exactly what we've seen with figures like Donald Trump. He didn't just win votes, he captured imaginations, hijacking collective consciousness. For many, he became a kind of saviour. But this isn't about whether Trump is good or bad. This is about why people were so drawn to him and what that says about us. We all carry unconscious patterns, shared stories, images, and symbols that influence the way we think and act, even if we're not aware of them. Jung called this the collective unconscious. One of the strongest patterns in that space is the saviour, the one who brings hope, healing, or transformation. Think of Jesus, Buddha, or Superman. These figures show up again and again in human culture. The saviour represents something big, wholeness, truth, and the promise of making things right. But there's a problem when people try to find that outside of themselves, especially in one person. Instead of doing the hard work of change on a personal or collective level, people project all their hopes and fears onto one leader. That's when things get dangerous. Jung also talked a lot about something called the shadow. It's everything we don't want to admit about ourselves: the selfishness, the fear, the anger, the pain. Instead of dealing with it, we shove it into the background. But it doesn't go away. It builds up, and eventually it comes out, usually by being projected onto others. So when we see someone as a saviour, it's often because we're not dealing with our own issues. We turn that person into a symbol. They're no longer just a leader, they're a fantasy. They carry all the things we long for, and sometimes all the things we hate. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the unconscious conscious." In other words, real growth means facing our shadows, not escaping into fantasies. Donald Trump wasn't just seen as a president. For many people, he was a larger-than-life figure, a protector, a warrior, even a kind of chosen one. He promised to fix things, to fight back against the chaos, to bring back a golden age. Whether or not he actually could wasn't really the point. What mattered was how he made people feel: powerful, heard, and protected. At the same time, for others, Trump became the embodiment of everything wrong with the world. They saw him as a threat, a symbol of division and decay. That extreme reaction on both sides says a lot. It tells us he wasn't just being judged as a politician, he was being used as a mirror for the collective psyche. He triggered unconscious patterns, especially around power, identity, and control. Psychologist Erich Neumann wrote, "Where the leader is, there is the group's soul." Trump didn't create division, he weaponized it, transforming collective fear into a cult of personality. People weren't just voting, they were investing in a myth. When a society is hurting or confused, it becomes fertile ground for a false messiah. That's someone who appears to be a saviour, but is really just reflecting the collective's unresolved issues. They might say the right things, strike the right tone, or look the part. But underneath, they're feeding off projection. They thrive on attention, adoration, and fear. And they often inflate themselves to match the image people want. In the Bible, the Antichrist mimics Christ's miracles to deceive. In Jewish history, Bar Kokhba claimed divine status, but led a catastrophic revolt against Rome. Jung called these figures manifestations of the inflated ego, where a leader mistakes personal ambition for divine destiny. The false messiah thrives on charisma laced with deception. They demand loyalty, but give none in return. They promise protection while sowing division. Jung warned about this kind of thing. He said that when people avoid facing their inner problems, those problems get pushed out onto the world. And when someone shows up who seems to offer a way out, they become a vessel for all that unconscious energy. But it doesn't last. Eventually, reality catches up. These figures don't actually fix things. They can't, because they were never really about solutions. They were about fantasy, about avoiding the hard work of change. And when they fail, people feel betrayed, disillusioned, or angry. The cycle continues. The leaders we choose say a lot about where we are as a culture. Trump didn't come out of nowhere. He rose to power during a time of deep anxiety, economic uncertainty, political division, cultural shifts. People were looking for something solid to hold on to. Trump offered clarity in a time of confusion, strength in a time of weakness, identity in a time of fragmentation. But his rise also shows us how disconnected we've become from our inner lives. Instead of asking hard questions or facing difficult truths, many people looked outward for answers. They wanted someone to rescue them, not someone to remind them that the real work has to be done inside. This isn't just about Trump. It's a pattern that can repeat with any leader, left or right, when we give away our power in exchange for promises. So what's the alternative? It starts with awareness. Instead of looking for saviors, we need to start looking in the mirror. Jung's idea of individuation is about becoming whole, bringing the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves together. It's not easy. It means confronting our fears, accepting our flaws, and taking responsibility for our own lives. We also need to become more conscious of the symbols we create. When someone starts to look like a savior, we should pause and ask, what part of myself am I projecting onto this person? What am I avoiding in my own life? Healthy leadership isn't about rescuing people. It's about helping them grow. A good leader reflects back to society what it needs to see, not what it wants to hear. They don't carry the whole burden. They help share it. They encourage us to face our shadows, not escape from them. The Saviour archetype is powerful because it speaks to something deep inside us. We all want healing, meaning, and transformation. But that kind of change doesn't come from outside. It starts within. False messiahs only have power because we give it to them. When we take back that power, when we do the inner work, we stop falling for the illusion. Donald Trump is just one example of how this dynamic plays out. There will be others. But if we can learn to see the pattern, if we can understand the psychology behind the myth, we can start to break free from it. As Jung said, the world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. If we want to change the world, we have to start with the psyche, our own. No one is coming to save us, and maybe that's not such a bad thing, because once we realize that, we can finally begin to save ourselves. I hope you find this video valuable. Join the Kairos Collective for future updates.